Kaepernick over Jay-Z in my book. Okay. So now I'm gonna move on to what this topic is about. This is did the Bible enslave black people? Now we done all heard this before, right? Especially in the conscious circles, that the Bible, I don't believe in the Bible. It enslaved black people. Why do you even believe in the Bible? That's the book they use to enslave us. That's the common argument that you hear all the time. And um, nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, I feel like, and y'all probably heard me say this before, that when it comes to black people, we are very, very much like parrots. We parrot a lot of things that we heard, and we base a lot of things. Our stances are usually based on how we feel, not what we research, not what we, delve into and try to actually find out. It's just something that we heard and it sounds good and it makes sense. And so you look at black people as a strong people. We're very resilient, very strong. There's nobody in the world that is like black people that came through the transatlantic slave trade, without a doubt. There's nobody in the world like us. Just like the resiliency that we have, the way that we were able to still create a culture within a culture. There's nobody like us, hands down. But you will say, how was these people able to be taken down? How was these great people able to be, conquered and reduced to enslaved people? How could that happen? And many people resort to saying, well, the Bible is the reason why. And so I'm gonna go into some history. I'm gonna go into a book. And first of all, I just want to say that just from my understanding, that couldn't have been true. Because just from a historical perspective, like we came over here and we were indoctrinated with the religion of Christianity. When the transatlantic slave trade happened, that was not what was happening. They was not sending missionaries or people to go, Europeans to go over there with a Bible in their hand in order to get black people on those boats. That's not what they was doing. They was literally negotiating with African tribal leaders. And so this is a good book that I'm gonna go into. I'm gonna read a little bit about it and then I'll end. I'm only trying to go about 30 minutes, but I wanted to do this video yesterday, but I was unable to do it yesterday. So I'm trying to squeeze it in and today before I have to go to the slave, which is, work. So let me pull this up real quick and I'll start with this. This book is called Middle Passages, African-American Journeys to Africa, 1787 to 2005. This book particularly was written by James T. Campbell. And I'm going to read this right here on the screen. It says I'm reading what's highlighted. It says, with rare exceptions, the European presence in Africa during the centuries of the slave trade was confined to coastal forts and factories, meaning the satellite cities. They had forts and factories on the coast. They call it the Gold Coast or the Ivory Coast. Okay, I'm gonna keep reading. Leaving the actual business of procuring captives and marching them to the coast to the African trading partners. You see that? So the Europeans didn't go inside of the interior of Africa. It was the African trading partners that you went and got these slaves, that procured these slaves and marched them. You probably can just Google and see how they would go and they would capture enemies. They would take captives. They would kidnap people, such as the case of Elada Equeno. He tells the story of how him and his sister was kidnapped and they was marched to the shores. But they were African partners. They were partners with the Europeans. The Europeans didn't go into Africa and fight. They didn't go into Africa they didn't go into Africa with their Bibles. They didn't go into Africa to fight. They went into Africa as businessmen and they went into agreement with these African leaders as partners. So this is something that, and I'll get to it, but this is something like when you talk about the transatlantic slave trade, this is something that a lot of white supremacists like to bring up. oh, what you sold your own people. We're going to get to that. We're going to get to that. Did the Africans sell their own people? But the point that I'm making is that they were partners. They were in allegiance together. Somebody had to catch you, capture you, kidnap you, and then somebody had to buy you. A lot of times in the Western society in America, we only see it from the side of the people that bought us, which are the Europeans. But what about the people that sold us to the Europeans? Okay, let me get back to it. It says the popular image of Europeans on horseback sweeping into unsuspecting villages may express a symbolic truth, but it is not historically accurate. So it's saying Europeans coming up in there and conquering these unsuspected villages and snatching people and putting them on boats. It's not historic. It says the vast majority of African captives would never have seen a white man until they reached the coast, or even until they were loaded aboard a ship. Indeed, this is part of what made the experience of loading so disorienting and terrifying. So these people that were put on the boats would have never even seen a white man until they were marched to the shores. The idea of white people coming into Africa and just sweeping across it and taking it like they did in Mexico in the Yucatan, it didn't happen like that in Africa. It just didn't happen like that. Now in the Yucatan Peninsula, the Spanish conquistadors came in there and swept through. They battled and fought all the way into the interior and took the Aztecs and the Mayans back to Spain and Europe and things like that. But that didn't happen in Africa. These Europeans came, these British, these French, they came and they sat down with these African tribal leaders and they made deals and they became partners. And so once again, somebody had to sell you and capture you and kidnap you and fight you and bring you as a prisoner of war all the way and march you. And that would be to the coast. And that would be the first time you would see a white man. Okay, let me read some more. It says, many hard historical truths, like many hard historical truths, African participation in the slave trade is susceptible to misunderstanding and abuse. Defenders of the trade, facing rising opposition in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, would place great stress on African complicity. Their arguments quickly assumed the quality of the catechism. Slavery was an endemic to Africa, a land racked by perpetual war and unspeakable savagery. Those imported to America were, in fact, the lucky ones, for their labor was delight and they enjoyed the blessings of Christianity and civilization. Once again, there's that Christianity. Okay. And I'll get to that. But the point is saying that, and this is talking to the white supremacists that say, well, yeah, we did do our part, but African tribal leaders sold you guys. Then when you got over here, because we're a Christian nation, you basically are lucky. Like, what did they say recently? What was that in Florida? What is his name? The Santos or whatever. The governor said that Black people we were like we learned trades and skills in slavery, so we benefited from slavery, right? But getting back to the point is that I was going to make is that a lot of times white supremacists use that. They say, well, because they feel so much guilt, and to get out of what they done, they'll say, what about the fact that your own people sold you? Not realizing that these wasn't our own people, not realizing, and it's going to speak to that. And this is something I've always known and I've always questioned. If you're going to sell, why would you sell your own people? Why would you, if there was a man that came and they looked like something you've never seen before, why would you sell your own to these people to take them across the ocean? Think about it like this. You live in a village, in a town, everybody knows everybody. So if that was the case, that they were selling their own people, you would have to sell, capture, kidnap people that you knew, that you grew up with, maybe relatives. And it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. But that's what we're taught, and that's what we commonly believe in America, and that's what Europeans believe also. They believe we were all the same. Even back then, they looked at us as all one. But we're going to get to that. Let me get back to the the book. It says that, I'm skipping down. It says that Ayuba's experience, and let me just preface letting you know that Ayuba was a Muslim man that was a prince. He was on his way selling slaves, and after he sold the slaves, some Mandingos um, basically caught him and took him and his friend into slavery. He ended up in America. They realized that he was a prince and that he was educated, and he was sent from America to Britain, and then from Britain back to his homeland after some years to help Britain with the slave trade. And so this is just talking about him, how he was captured by people that was not his people. Okay. So let me just go. Ayuba's experience also helps to dispel one of the enduring misconceptions about the slave trade, the idea that Africans sold their own people. In Africa, as in North and South America, ancient Greece and Rome, and virtually every other known slave society, slaves tended to be culturally and ethnically alien to those who enslaved them. And that's the point that I was getting at. These people that were enslaved were ethnically and culturally different. Now, in America, we think that all Black people are the same. We all come from the motherland. We all come from Africa. And to a certain degree, I think a lot of Africans believe that too, especially modern Native Africans do also believe that, like, we're just all the same. You came from this continent. That means we're all the same. You know what I mean? I'm gonna read a little bit more because I think there's some more in it. It says that Africa was and is a dizzying diverse continent with more than 2,000 mutually unintelligible languages and a virtually infinite array of ethnic, political, and religious identities and rivalries. The men who sold Ayuba were not Fula, but Mandinke. The identity of the slaves trafficked by Ayuba is unclear, but they were almost certainly neither Fula nor Muslim, meaning they were not his people. The people that caught him and sold him to Europeans were not his people. They were Black though, but they were culturally and ethnically different. It says today, of course, most Americans imagine Africa as a single place inhabited by a single race of people, but that conception is in itself an outgrowth of the slave trade, an artifact of the centuries-long encounter between Africa and the West. Let me read a little bit more. It says, well, it goes in to say that Ayuba, he wouldn't have understood, and the people of that time, 300 years ago in Africa, they wouldn't have understood the concept of everybody being the same in Africa. They wouldn't have understood that. Like how we think today, the concept, how white people think, how Black people look at Africa as this single continent and everybody is the same. You go back 300 years ago, people wouldn't have not understood that. Africans wouldn't have been able to put compartmentalize that in their brain. Like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm from here. This is my people. Culturally and ethnically, we're not the same as our neighbors. This tribe that lives over here. That's the point. The point is that when we were enslaved, we were not the same as the people who were enslaving us and putting us on cargo slave ships. Well, marching us to the coast and selling us to Europeans. That's the point, right? And so when you talk about that the Bible enslaved Black people, no, the Bible had nothing to do with Black people during the transatlantic slave trade. That didn't come until later on, once we got to American soil, where we were indoctrinated with the philosophies and the theology of Christianity. But as you can see, I hope I highlighted that the way it went down was that everybody wasn't the same. And also the Europeans came not with a Bible. They came and negotiated. They brought guns, they brought different things to trade for with these African kingdoms. And that's the spur, and that's the beginning of the transatlantic slave trade. So to answer the question, which I posed, I don't know if I put a question mark in the beginning, but just to answer that question, no. Let me see. Somebody gave me a comment. Oh, you're welcome, sis. Francine Hawkins, you're welcome. You're welcome. You know, it's my pleasure. You know what I mean? I see a couple people up in here. Before I get out of here, if anybody wants to you want to add something to this topic, you want to talk about it or anything else before I get up out of here, I'm going to put the link in the comments. If anybody want to hop in and just add to what I'm saying, or you know what I mean? But yeah, at the end of the day, we have to understand that everybody ain't the same. Just because you have melanin in your skin, that doesn't mean that you are the same race. And even back then, people back then would have said, what do you mean like we're the same? We're not the same as you.